The rain turned Flatbush Avenue into a river of reflected neon, each droplet catching the glow of bodega signs and taxi lights, before disappearing into the gurgling storm drains. My sneakers, the ones I'd resoled twice already, squelched with every step, water seeping through the duct tape I'd carefully placed over the split in the left sole this morning. The weight on my shoulder had gone from uncomfortable to agonizing somewhere around block 7, but I didn't dare shift Maddie's position. At 4 years old, he was getting too heavy for me to carry like this. But the stroller had broken last week, and I couldn't afford a replacement until next month's check cleared. My fingers ached from gripping the canvas strap of my work bag, stuffed with cleaning supplies that jabbed into my hip with each step. The chemical smell of industrial cleaner clung to my hair, mixing with the metallic scent of rain and the grease from the deli where I'd done my second shift. 3 jobs today, 4 tomorrow. That was the math that kept us fed, kept the landlord from changing the locks, kept Maddie in that daycare that cost more than our rent, but was the only place in walking distance that would take him. The cafe appeared through the downpour like a lighthouse, its warm windows fogged with condensation and crowded with people seeking shelter from the storm. I hesitated at the door, very aware of how I must look, soaked through, my cheap work uniform clinging to my frame, a sleeping child draped over me like a human blanket, my hair plastered to my skull. Places like this, even the modest ones, had a way of making people like me feel unwelcome. The well-dressed professionals nursing their $7 lattes didn't want to share space with someone who smelled like pine sol and desperation. But Maddie's forehead was warm against my neck, and his breathing had that congested rattle that meant his allergies were acting up again. We couldn't walk the remaining 12 blocks home in this weather. I couldn't afford for him to get sick. Not again. Not when I'd just finished paying off the last urgent care visit. I pushed through the door, and a bell chimed somewhere overhead. The warmth hit me like a wall, making my cold, numbed face tingle painfully as sensation returned. Every table was occupied, couples leaning close over shared desserts, students hunched over laptops, groups of friends laughing over something on someone's phone. The air smelled of coffee and cinnamon, vanilla, and something baking in the back. My stomach twisted with hunger I'd been ignoring since the banana I'd eaten at 6 this morning. I scanned for an empty chair, just somewhere to sit for 10 minutes, to let Maddie rest without me standing, to give my aching back a moment's reprieve. Nothing. Every seat claimed, every corner full. I was about to turn around and brave the storm again when I noticed him. He sat alone at a table near the back, positioned with his back to the wall in that way that suggested he was either paranoid or had reason to be cautious. The table was meant for 2, but he'd arranged himself so that the chair across from him remained empty, despite the crowded cafe. Everything about him radiated money and power in that quiet, understated way that the truly wealthy possessed. His suit was charcoal, perfectly tailored to broad shoulders that spoke of time spent doing something more physical than sitting behind a desk. Dark hair, styled back from a face of sharp angles and harder edges. A watch on his wrist that caught the light. Nothing flashy, but I'd worked enough wealthy apartments to recognize the subtle gleam of real platinum. He was looking at his phone, or pretending to, his expression unreadable. There was something about the stillness of him that made everyone else in the cafe seem frantic by comparison, as if he existed in a different gear than the rest of humanity. The slight silver at his temples suggested he was older than the boyish tech executives who flooded the neighborhood. Mid-30s, maybe early 40s. Old enough to have built something substantial. Old enough to know exactly how dangerous he was. I knew I should look away. Should find somewhere else. Anywhere else. But Maddie's weight was making my shoulder go numb, and that empty chair called to me like salvation. Before I could talk myself out of it, my feet carried me forward. I approached the table with my heart hammering against my ribs, very aware that every eye in the cafe seemed to track my movement. The man didn't look up until I was standing right there, water dripping from my jacket onto the pristine hardwood floor. "Excuse me," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I'd intended. "Do you mind if I sit? Just for a few minutes." The storm... He looked up then, and the words died in my throat. His eyes were gray, the color of steel, or storm clouds, or the barrel of a gun. They swept over me in a single assessing glance that took in everything: the sleeping child, the soaked clothes, the exhaustion I wore like a second skin. I waited for the dismissal, the cold refusal, the suggestion that I try somewhere else. Instead, his expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read. Not quite recognition, but something close to it. Something that made the air between us feel suddenly charged. "Sit," he said, his voice low and measured, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. Russian, maybe. Eastern European. I've waited long enough. The strange phrasing confused me, but I was too tired and too grateful to question it. I carefully lowered myself into the chair, adjusting Matty so his head rested against my chest instead of my shoulder. He stirred slightly, making that little whimpering sound he did when his dreams turned uncomfortable, then settled again with his thumb finding its way to his mouth. I realized I was shivering, my body finally registering just how cold and wet I was. The man, I didn't even know his name, raised his hand in a subtle gesture that immediately brought a waiter to the table. Not the harried teenager who'd been juggling orders, but an older man in a crisp white shirt who appeared with the efficiency of someone responding to a summons from royalty. "Hot tea," the man said, not asking me what I wanted. "The chamomile and soup, the chicken, if they have it. Bread, whatever's freshest." His eyes flicked to Matty. "Hot chocolate, warm, not hot, and one of those chocolate croissants in the case." "Right away, Mr. Volkov," the waiter said, disappearing before I could protest. Mr. Volkov. The name echoed in my head with a strange familiarity I couldn't place. I knew I should recognize it, should understand why the waiter had straightened so visibly at the sight of him, why the people at nearby tables had suddenly become very interested in their own conversations. "I can't," I started, but he interrupted with a slight shake of his head. "You look like you've been working since dawn," he said. It wasn't a question. "When did you last eat?" The directness of the question disarmed me. "I had a banana this morning. There wasn't time for lunch and my dinner shift ran late, and then I had to pick up Matty." I stopped, realizing I was explaining my entire day to a complete stranger. Something flickered in those gray eyes. Not pity, which I would have hated, but something darker. Something that looked almost like anger, though not directed at me. "How old is he?" Volkov asked, nodding toward Matty. "4, I said, my hand automatically moving to cup the back of my son's head in that protective gesture that had become instinctive. 4 next month, actually. "He looks like you," Volkov observed, and there was something odd in his tone. Same chin, same way of frowning even while sleeping. I blinked, surprised he'd noticed such details. Most people, especially men like him, didn't look at people like us long enough to notice anything. The food arrived with startling speed, steaming bowls and plates that made my mouth water involuntarily. The waiter set everything down with practiced efficiency, and I noticed how he called Volkov "sir," with a deference that went beyond good service into something closer to fear. "Please," Volkov said, gesturing to the food. "Eat." "I really should," I began, but my stomach betrayed me with a loud growl that made his mouth quirk into something that might have been amusement on a face less severe. "Eat," he repeated, and this time it wasn't a suggestion. I ate. Not delicately, not with the manners my mother had tried to instill in me back when I still lived in a world where manners mattered. I ate like someone who was starving because I was. The soup was rich and hot, warming me from the inside out. The bread was fresh and soft, butter melting into its still warm crust. I tried to eat slowly to make it look less desperate, but I was too hungry to maintain pretense. Volkov watched me with that same unreadable expression, sipping his own coffee, black, no sugar, served in a delicate cup that looked absurd in his large hands. Hands that were scarred across the knuckles in a pattern that suggested old injuries from hitting things or people. "What's your name?" he asked when I'd slowed down enough to breathe. "Jasmine," I said, then added stupidly, "Turner. Jasmine Turner." "Jasmine," he repeated, as if testing the weight of it. "You worked at the Millennium Towers building 6 months ago. 5th floor. Tuesday and Thursday evenings." My spoon paused halfway to my mouth. "How do you—" "I had meetings there," he said simply. "You emptied the trash in the conference room. Always polite. Always careful not to disturb anyone even though they barely noticed you were there." The memory came flooding back. An office building in Manhattan. One of my better-paying gigs before they'd cut my hours. I'd cleaned the executive floors, moving like a ghost through spaces filled with expensive furniture and expensive people. I vaguely remembered a man who'd nodded at me once, actually meeting my eyes instead of looking through me like I was part of the furniture. Could that have been him? "I don't understand," I said slowly. "Why would you remember that? I'm just—" "Just what?" he interrupted, and there was an edge to his voice now. "Just a woman trying to survive? Just a mother doing whatever it takes to provide for her child? Those aren't small things, Jasmine Turner." The use of my full name sent a strange shiver down my spine. There was an intimacy to it that shouldn't have existed between strangers. But we weren't quite strangers anymore, were we? He'd remembered me across 6 months and thousands of faces. He'd seen me when no one else had. "I should go," I said, even as every muscle in my body protested the idea of moving. "Maddie needs to get home, and I've taken up enough of your time." "Where's home?" Volkov asked. I hesitated, but something about the way he asked, not invasive, but genuinely wanting to know, made me answer. "Crown Heights, about 12 blocks. He glanced at the window, where rain still hammered against the glass in sheets. "In this storm, with a sleeping child. After working how many jobs today?" 3, I admitted. 4 tomorrow." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And his father?" The question landed like a physical blow. "Gone," I said flatly. "Has been since before Maddie was born. Turns out promising forever is easier than actually staying." Volkov nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then set it down. "A car will be here in 3 minutes," he said. "It will take you home." "I can't accept—" "You can," he interrupted. "And you will, because walking 12 blocks in this weather will make you sick. And then who takes care of him?" He nodded at Maddie. "Pride is expensive, Jasmine. Sometimes it costs more than we can afford." The truth of it stung because he was right. I was already exhausted, already pushing my body past what it could safely handle. Getting sick meant missing work, which meant missing paychecks, which meant the careful balance I'd constructed would collapse entirely. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you even care?" Volkov was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes holding mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low I had to lean forward to hear it. "Because 6 months ago, in that building, you smiled at me," he said. "A real smile. Not the kind people give to someone they're afraid of or want something from. Just a smile because I held a door. Because I said thank you. Because for 30 seconds, you treated me like a human being instead of a monster." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I couldn't begin to unpack. Before I could respond, his phone vibrated. He glanced at it and stood with fluid grace. "Your car is here," he said. Black SUV. The driver's name is Mikhail. He'll get you home safely. I stood too, carefully adjusting Maddie's weight. I don't know how to thank you. Don't, Volkov said. He pulled out a business card, heavy stock, simple font, and pressed it into my free hand. But if you ever need anything at all, call that number. I looked down at the card. Adrian Volkov in raised letters. No company name, no title. Just a phone number. I don't understand, I said again, looking back up at him. His expression softened almost imperceptibly, and for the first time, I saw something vulnerable beneath the dangerous exterior. Neither do I, he admitted, but I'm done pretending I don't want to. He walked me to the door, his presence somehow clearing a path through the crowded cafe. The SUV was indeed waiting, sleek and black, and completely out of place on this rain-soaked Brooklyn street. A man with shoulders like a linebacker opened the door for me, helping me settle Maddie in the back seat with a gentleness that belied his intimidating size. As the door closed and the car pulled away from the curb, I looked back through the rain-streaked window. Adrian Volkov stood in the doorway of the cafe, hands in his pockets, watching until we were out of sight. I didn't understand what had just happened. Didn't understand why a man like that, whatever he was, would care about someone like me. But as I held his business card in my hand and felt Maddie's warm weight against me in the leather seat of a car that cost more than I'd earn in 5 years, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: my life had just changed in ways I couldn't begin to predict. The morning after the storm, I woke to find an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No name, no return address, just thick cream-colored paper that felt expensive between my fingers. Inside was a check for exactly $2,000 and a note in precise masculine handwriting. For the things you need, not charity, investment in something that matters. My hands trembled as I stared at the numbers. More money than I'd seen in one place since before Maddie was born. The signature at the bottom was just initials, AV. But I knew exactly who it was from. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to prove I wasn't the kind of person who could be bought. But the larger part, the part that counted pennies and skipped meals, knew I couldn't afford pride. I deposited the check during my lunch break, half expecting it to bounce, to reveal itself as some kind of elaborate joke. It cleared instantly. That afternoon, I paid 3 months' rent in advance, bought Maddie new shoes that actually fit, and replaced the medication I'd been rationing because I couldn't afford refills. For the first time in months, I went to bed without that gnawing anxiety about which bill I'd have to choose not to pay. I should have known it wouldn't end there. The second envelope arrived 3 days later. This time it contained a receipt. The daycare had been paid through the end of the year. When I called them, frantic and confused, the director's voice was warm but firm. A Mr. Volkov called personally. He was very insistent that we provide young Matthew with the best care possible. The account is settled, Ms. Turner. Please don't worry. Don't worry. As if I could do anything else. I pulled out his business card a dozen times that day, my thumb tracing the raised letters of his name. I should call him, I thought. Should demand he stop, should return the money, should establish boundaries. But every time I reached for my phone, Maddie would laugh at something, or I'd realize I'd slept through the night without nightmares about eviction notices, and the words wouldn't come. The third incident happened at my main cleaning job, the office building in Midtown where I'd worked the longest. My supervisor, a bitter woman named Sharon who'd made my life difficult since day one, called me into her cramped office with a face like she'd bitten into something sour. "You're being transferred," she said flatly, sliding a paper across her desk. "Corporate decision. Apparently someone requested you specifically for a private contract. Triple your current rate, better hours, full benefits." I stared at the document, my heart pounding. The contract was with Volkov Industries, a name I'd never heard before, but somehow knew belonged to him. The address was in Manhattan, one of those buildings where even the janitors probably earned more than I did now. "I don't understand," I said, which was becoming my most frequent statement. "I didn't apply for this." Sharon's lip curled. "Lucky you. Some of us work for years without getting opportunities handed to us." She shoved another paper toward me. "Sign if you're accepting. They want you to start Monday." My hand hovered over the pen. This was too much, too fast. He was reorganizing my entire life without asking, making decisions that should have been mine to make. It should have made me angry. It did make me angry. But it also made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Seen, valued, protected. I signed the paper. That evening, I finally called the number on his card. He answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that same measured quality I remembered from the cafe. "Jasmine." Not a question. He'd known it would be me. "You can't keep doing this," I said, pacing the narrow strip of floor between my couch and kitchen. Matty was occupied with his blocks, building towers just to knock them down again. The money, the daycare, the job. You can't just insert yourself into my life like this. Can't I? There was no arrogance in the question, just genuine curiosity. You needed help. I provided it. What part of that is unacceptable? "The part where I don't know you," I said, frustration bleeding into my voice. "The part where this is all happening too fast, too much. The part where I don't understand why a man like you even cares about a woman like me." Silence stretched between us for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost vulnerable in a way that didn't match the dangerous man I'd met in the cafe. "Do you believe in signs, Jasmine?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" "Signs. Fate. Whatever you want to call it. I never did. Built my entire life on control, on making things happen through force of will. And then I saw you." He paused and I could hear him breathing. 3 times in 6 months. Always when you were at your worst. Always being strong for everyone but yourself. The 3rd time was that night in the cafe. And I realized I was tired of pretending I hadn't been looking for you every time I walked into a building you might be cleaning. My throat went tight. "Adrian, let me help you," he said simply. "Not because you need saving, but because I need to know you're safe. That he's safe." "Maddie," he meant. "Is that so terrible?" "I don't know," I admitted, sinking onto my second-hand couch. "I don't know what this is or what you want from me." "Have dinner with me," he said. "Tomorrow night. Let me explain properly. Let me show you I'm not the monster you're probably imagining. I have Maddie." "Bring him," Adrian interrupted. "I'm not asking you to leave him. I would never ask you to leave him." The certainty in his voice, the way he included my son without hesitation, cracked something open in my chest. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Tomorrow, but somewhere public." "Of course," I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'll send a car. 6 o'clock." He hung up before I could argue about the car. The next evening, I dressed in the nicest thing I owned, a simple blue dress I'd bought at a thrift store for a job interview that never happened. I'd washed and dried Maddie's good clothes, the ones I saved for special occasions, and tried to tame his wild curls into something presentable. He was excited about the fancy dinner, bouncing around the apartment, asking if there would be French fries. The SUV arrived precisely at 6. Mikhail, the same driver from before, greeted me with a respectful nod and helped me get Maddie into the car seat that was already installed in the back. A car seat. Adrian had thought of a car seat. We drove to a restaurant in Brooklyn Heights, the kind of place with white tablecloths and menus without prices. Adrian was waiting at a private table in the back, and when he saw Maddie, his entire demeanor shifted. He knelt down to my son's level, offering his hand with a formality that made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. "You must be Matthew," he said seriously. "I'm Adrian. It's very nice to meet you." Maddie, who was usually shy around strangers, studied Adrian with the intense focus children sometimes possess. Then he placed his small hand in Adrian's much larger one and shook it solemnly. "You can call me Maddie. Only my mom calls me Matthew when I'm in trouble." Adrian's mouth twitched into something close to a smile. "Then Maddie it is." The dinner was surreal in its normalcy. Adrian had somehow arranged for the kitchen to make chicken fingers and French fries for Maddie, served on the same fine china as our more sophisticated meals. He asked my son about his favorite colors, his favorite games, what he wanted to be when he grew up. He listened to 4-year-old logic with the same attention I imagined he gave to business negotiations, and he watched me. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but with an intensity that suggested he was memorizing everything. The way I cut Maddie's food into careful pieces, how I wiped his mouth with my napkin, the automatic way I moved his water glass further from the edge of the table. "You're a good mother," Adrian said quietly when Maddie was distracted by the dessert menu, sounding out words he was just learning to read. "I try," I said, something defensive in my tone. "It's not always pretty and we don't have much, but he's happy. He's healthy. That's what matters." "He's more than that," Adrian said. "He's loved. Really loved. Not the conditional kind that evaporates when things get difficult. The kind that means you work 3 jobs and eat bananas for breakfast so he can have everything he needs." His gray eyes met mine. "That's rare, Jasmine. More rare than you know." Before I could respond, a man approached our table. He was younger than Adrian, well-dressed, with the kind of expensive haircut that screamed money. His eyes swept over me and Maddie with casual dismissal before focusing on Adrian. "Volkov," he said, not bothering with a greeting. "Didn't expect to see you in a place like this. With—" He trailed off, the implication clear. Adrian's expression went cold in a way that made the temperature at our table drop several degrees. "Dimitri, this is a private dinner. You're interrupting." Dimitri's smile was all edges. "Just wanted to congratulate you on your new acquisition. Though I have to say, I didn't think charity work was your style." He didn't finish the sentence. Adrian was on his feet with fluid speed that belonged to someone trained in violence, his hand closing around Dimitri's wrist with enough force that the other man's face went white. "Choose your next words very carefully," Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. "Because the next insult you direct at this woman or her son will be the last thing you say for a very long time." I should have been frightened. Every instinct should have been screaming at me to grab Maddie and run from these dangerous men and their dangerous world. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Protected. Valued. Seen not as a charity case, but as someone worth defending. Dimitri jerked his wrist free, his face mottled with anger, and something that looked like fear. "My apologies," he said stiffly, directing the words at Adrian rather than me. "I didn't realize." "No," Adrian interrupted. "You didn't, and now you do. Leave." Dimitri left, practically fleeing the restaurant. Adrian remained standing for a moment, watching him go, before turning back to our table. The cold fury melted away when his eyes found Maddie, who was watching with wide eyes, his dessert spoon forgotten in his hand. "I apologize," Adrian said, sitting back down with careful control. That was inappropriate behavior for a dinner table. "You were scary," Maddie said with the brutal honesty of children. Then thoughtfully, "But you were scary at the bad man, not at us." Adrian's expression softened completely. "No, never at you. Either of you." We finished dinner in a strange new atmosphere, something unspoken having shifted between us. When Adrian walked us to the car, his hand rested at the small of my back, possessive and protective in equal measure. Before I could get in, he caught my arm gently. "I need you to understand something," he said. "What you saw tonight, what Dmitri implied. People in my world will try to use you to get to me. Will try to hurt you to hurt me. I can protect you, Jasmine. I can protect him." His eyes went to Maddie, already drowsy in his car seat. "But only if you let me." "What exactly is your world?" I asked, though I was starting to understand. The deference, the fear, the way he'd threatened Dmitri with such casual menace. "Nothing you need to be part of," he said. "Just know that it's mine to control, and I control it absolutely. No one touches what belongs to me." The possessiveness should have alarmed me. Instead, it ignited something warm and dangerous in my chest. "I don't belong to you, Adrian." His smile was slight but genuine. "Not yet," he agreed. "But you will, because I see how you look at me when you think I'm not watching. I see how you relax when I'm near, how you let yourself breathe for the first time in years. You're exhausted from carrying the world alone, Jasmine. Let me help you carry it." I couldn't answer. Didn't know how to explain that he terrified and comforted me in equal measure, that I was already half in love with the way he looked at my son, that I was betraying every survival instinct I had by wanting to say yes. "Think about it," he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead that felt like a brand. "I'll wait. I'm patient when it comes to things that matter." As the car pulled away, I watched through the back window as Adrian stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching us disappear into the Brooklyn night. Maddie was already asleep, his head lolling against the car seat, completely trusting in a way I wasn't sure I could be. But I was starting to want to be. Starting to imagine what it might feel like to let someone else be strong for a while, to accept protection without shame, to believe that maybe, impossibly, a man like Adrian Volkov could want someone like me for reasons that had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with something deeper. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sleep well, Jasmine. You're safe now. You'll always be safe." I saved the number under his name and fell asleep holding my phone, with dreams that didn't feature eviction notices or empty refrigerators for the first time in years. 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. I started my job at Volkov Industries, a position that was ostensibly administrative, but felt more like Adrian ensuring I had stability without the physical demands of cleaning. The office was pristine, the hours reasonable, and my co-workers treated me with a respect I wasn't accustomed to receiving. It should have felt like charity, but Adrian had structured it so carefully that it simply felt like belonging. He called every evening, sometimes just to ask how Maddie's day had been, other times to tell me about some business complication, in that careful way that shared his life without exposing me to danger. We had dinner twice more, once with Maddie, once just the two of us when my neighbor Mrs. Chen offered to babysit. That second dinner was when I started to understand the scope of what I was stepping into. The restaurant was French and exclusive, the kind of place where Adrian was greeted by name and given the best table without asking. He'd worn a dark suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and I'd worn a dress he'd sent to my apartment. Designer, perfectly fitted, with a note that said simply, "You deserve beautiful things." "Tell me about before," he'd said over wine I couldn't pronounce. "Before Maddie's father left, before you were alone." I'd hesitated, then found myself talking about college, about the girl I'd been who'd believed in happy endings and romantic gestures, about meeting James at a party, how charming he'd seemed, how quickly love had turned to pregnancy had turned to abandonment, how I'd dropped out with 2 semesters remaining, how my parents had stopped speaking to me when I'd refused to give the baby up for adoption. "I was so stupid," I'd said, staring at my plate. "I believed every promise, every sweet word. I thought love was supposed to feel like drowning, like you couldn't breathe without the other person. I didn't realize drowning was exactly what it was. Adrian had reached across the table, his hand covering mine with a warmth that spread up my arm. You weren't stupid. You were young and kind, and you believed the best in someone who didn't deserve it. That's not a flaw, Jasmine. It's the most beautiful thing about you. Now, 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my small apartment with Adrian beside me on the couch while Maddie played at our feet, building an elaborate city out of blocks. It was Saturday afternoon, the sun streaming through my patched curtains, and everything felt so domestic and normal that I kept forgetting the man on my couch could probably have me killed with a phone call. I need to tell you something, Adrian said, his voice carrying an unusual tension. About my life, about what I do. I set down my tea, giving him my full attention. I know what you do, Adrian. Or at least I know enough. His eyebrows rose slightly. Do you? You're Russian Mafia, I said quietly, conscious of Maddie nearby even though he was absorbed in his game. Bratva, I think it's called. You run operations on the East Coast, which is why people are afraid of you. Why Dmitri backed down so quickly. Why waiters and drivers call you sir like they're addressing royalty. Adrian studied me with those penetrating gray eyes. You've been researching. I Googled you, I admitted. Your name came up in some news articles. Nothing concrete, nothing provable in court, but enough to understand. I took a breath. Are you going to tell me I'm wrong? No, he said simply. You're not wrong. My father was Bratva. His father before him. I inherited an empire built on fear and violence and control. I've tried to legitimize parts of it. The businesses, the properties. But the foundation is still there. Still dark. Have you killed people? I asked, needing to know. His jaw tightened. Yes. The simple honesty of it should have sent me running. Instead, I found myself asking, did they deserve it? Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief that I was asking the right questions. They were trying to kill me first, or they had hurt innocents, women, children. I don't pretend to be a good man, Jasmine, but I have a code. Lines I don't cross. I looked at Maddie, happily stacking blocks, completely innocent in his world of simple joys. Is he in danger? Because of you? He's safer because of me, Adrian said firmly. Do you know how many enemies you accumulate when you have nothing? Landlords who take advantage, employers who exploit, men who see a woman alone and think she's easy prey. You've been vulnerable your entire life, Jasmine. You just didn't have anyone powerful enough to do anything about it. And now I do, I said slowly. Now you do, he confirmed. But I need you to understand what that means. It means people will know you're under my protection. It means some will respect that, and others will test it. It means your life changes in ways you can't predict. I was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, why me? Really, truly, why me? Adrian reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with a gentleness that belied his dangerous reputation. Do you know what it's like to live in a world where everything is a transaction? Where loyalty is bought, fear is currency, and genuine emotion is weakness? I've lived that way my entire life. And then I saw you smile at me in that hallway. And it wasn't because you wanted something or because you were afraid. It was just kindness. Real kindness from someone who had no reason to spare it. His hand moved to cup my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. I couldn't stop thinking about you. About that smile. About how someone so clearly struggling could still have enough light in her to be kind to a stranger. And then I saw you again. At different buildings, always working, always tired, always alone. I started asking questions. Found out about Maddie, about his father leaving, about how hard you were fighting just to survive. You stalked me, I said, but there was no heat in it. "I protected you," he corrected. "From a distance at first. Made sure certain landlords who were harassing you for additional payments suddenly lost interest. Made sure the manager who was shorting your paychecks found other employment. Small things that you never knew about." "That's not small," I said, my voice catching. "That's everything I wanted to give you but couldn't without revealing myself," he finished. "And then the storm happened. And you walked into that cafe, and I knew I was done waiting. Done pretending I didn't want you in my life in every possible way." Maddie chose that moment to bring over his block tower, carefully balanced and wobbling. "Look, I made a building like the ones we see in the car." Adrian's attention immediately shifted to my son, his expression softening in that way that always made my heart ache. "That's very impressive, Maddie. You have a good eye for architecture." What's architecture?" Maddie asked, attempting the big word. "It's the art of designing buildings," Adrian explained. "Making them strong and beautiful at the same time. Like your tower, it's tall, but you made sure the base is wide enough to hold it up. That's smart." Maddie beamed with pride, then carefully set the tower on the coffee table before climbing onto Adrian's lap, with the casual confidence of a child who already trusted completely. Adrian's arms came around him automatically, protective and natural, and I felt something in my chest crack wide open. This was what I'd never let myself imagine. A partner who saw my son not as baggage, but as a person worth knowing. A man who could be deadly to his enemies, but gentle with a 4-year-old's block tower. Someone who made me feel like I could finally stop running, stop fighting, stop surviving moment to moment. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly. Adrian's eyes met mine over Maddie's head. "Of me? Of what happens if this doesn't work," I said. "Of what happens if I let myself believe in this, and then it falls apart. I can't survive being abandoned again, Adrian. And I can't let Maddie learn that the adults in his life are temporary." "Then it's fortunate," Adrian said, his voice carrying absolute certainty, "that I don't abandon what's mine. I don't fail at the things that matter. And you, Jasmine Turner, you and this brave little boy, you matter more than anything else in my life." Maddie, sensing the seriousness of the conversation, tilted his head back to look at Adrian. "Are you going to be my dad?" he asked with heartbreaking directness. Adrian looked at me, a question in his eyes. I couldn't speak, could only nod through the tears that were suddenly blurring my vision. "Yes," Adrian said, his voice thick with emotion. "If you'll let me. If your mom will let me." "Okay," Maddie said simply, then snuggled against Adrian's chest with complete trust. "Can I call you Papa? Tyler at daycare has a papa and he says it's special." Adrian's arms tightened around him, and when he looked at me again, his eyes were bright with something I'd never expected to see there. Tears. "You can call me Papa," he said, his voice breaking slightly on the word. I moved closer, and Adrian's free arm pulled me against him, creating a tight circle of 3. We sat like that while the afternoon light shifted, and Maddie dozed against Adrian's chest, his small hand fisting in Adrian's expensive shirt. "I need ground rules," I said eventually, my head on Adrian's shoulder. "Things I need you to promise." "Anything," he said immediately. "Maddie's safety comes first. Always. If there's ever a threat because of your business, you tell me immediately. No protecting me from difficult truths." "Agreed." "I want to keep working. Not because we need the money anymore, but because I need to maintain my independence. I need to know I could survive on my own if I had to." "Understood." His hand was stroking my hair now, soothing and possessive at once. "Though I hope you'll come to trust that you'll never have to survive alone again." "And Maddie and I stay in this apartment," I continued. "At least for now." I know it's small and shabby compared to what you probably have, but it's ours. It's where we built our life together. I'm not ready to give that up yet." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "What if I could give you something better? Not my place. I understand that would be too much too fast. But somewhere safe. Somewhere Maddie could have a yard to play in, where you wouldn't worry about the heat cutting out in winter or the noise from neighbors." "Adrian, just think about it," he said. "No pressure. But Jasmine, the thought of you and him in a building without proper security, where I can't ensure you're completely safe, it makes me—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "I respect your independence. But please let me provide basic protection. That's not about control. It's about my sanity." I understood, because I was starting to learn how Adrian loved, fiercely, completely, with a possessiveness that would be terrifying if it wasn't so clearly rooted in genuine care. "Okay," I said. "We can look at other apartments. Together. I get veto power on anything I don't like. Deal." He kissed the top of my head. "Any other conditions?" "Just one more," I said, pulling back to look at him directly. "Be honest with me. Always. I'd rather face difficult truths than pretty lies. I had enough lies with James. If you're going to be part of our lives, part of Maddie's life, I need to trust that you're real." Adrian's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. "I promise you, Jasmine. No lies. No games. This, us. It's the most real thing in my life." He kissed me then, soft and careful, mindful of Maddie sleeping between us. It wasn't our first kiss. That had happened after our second dinner, a brief press of lips that had left me wanting more. But this one felt different. It felt like a promise, like a beginning, like the moment when everything irrevocably changed. When we pulled apart, Maddie was watching us with sleepy eyes. "Does this mean Adrian's staying for dinner?" he asked, yawning. Adrian looked at me, hope and vulnerability written across his usually guarded features. "Can I?" I thought about how empty the apartment would feel after he left, how Maddie would ask when Papa was coming back, how I was already reorganizing my life around the shape of Adrian Volkov. It should have terrified me. Somehow it just felt right. "Yes," I said. "Stay." He stayed for dinner. And then he stayed for bath time, reading Maddie a story with his deep voice turning animated for the different characters. He stayed until Maddie was asleep, his small hand clutching the edge of Adrian's sleeve even in slumber. And then he stayed a while longer, sitting with me in the quiet apartment, talking about everything and nothing. When he finally left, well past midnight, he kissed me at the door with a thoroughness that left me breathless. "I'll be back tomorrow," he promised, "and the day after. And every day you'll let me, until you stop seeing this as my visits and start seeing it as coming home." I watched from my window as he climbed into the waiting SUV, Mikhail standing guard as always. The car pulled away, and I hugged myself in the cool night air, already counting the hours until I'd see him again. My phone buzzed. "Thank you for letting me in, for letting me stay, for trusting me with him. I won't fail you, Jasmine. That's a promise I'll keep with my life." I fell asleep smiling. My last thought before dreams claimed me being that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally found someone who understood that love wasn't just about the fairy tale moments. It was about showing up, about staying, about choosing us, again and again, even when it was complicated and messy and hard. And Adrian Volkov, dangerous as he was, had chosen us. The apartment hunting started the following weekend. True to his word, Adrian let me take the lead, but his presence was felt in every building we visited. Doormen straightened when they saw him. Landlords suddenly had units available that weren't on the market. Property managers who'd looked at my application with skepticism in the past now fell over themselves to approve me. "This is too much," I said as we toured the 5th apartment of the day, a beautiful 2-bedroom in Park Slope with hardwood floors and a small balcony. Maddie was running from room to room, delighted by the space after our cramped studio. "Adrian, this place costs more per month than I make. Good thing you're not paying for it alone then," he said, watching Maddie with that soft expression he wore whenever he looked at my son. "And before you argue about independence, consider this. I own the building. You'd be paying rent to me anyway. I'd just prefer you do it while living somewhere safe and comfortable rather than somewhere the heat doesn't work." I wanted to argue, but he'd cornered me neatly. "You own this building." "I own 17 buildings in Brooklyn," he said mildly. "This is one of the nicer ones. Good schools nearby, park across the street. Mrs. Chen from your current building lives 3 floors down. I already asked if she'd be willing to continue helping with Maddie sometimes." My eyes went wide. "You asked Mrs. Chen to move?" "I offered her a better apartment at a reduced rate in exchange for being nearby if you needed her," he corrected. "She was enthusiastic about the idea. Said something about watching you struggle alone for too long and being glad someone finally had sense enough to help." I sank onto the window seat, overwhelmed. "You've thought of everything." Adrian joined me, his thigh pressing against mine in the small space. "I'm Russian, Mishka. We're thorough by nature." The endearment, little mouse, had appeared a few days ago, and I pretended not to notice how it made my heart skip. "What about security?" I asked, finally voicing the fear that had been growing. "You said people might test your protection of us. What does that mean practically?" His expression grew serious. "It means Mikhail or someone from my security team drives you and Maddie. It means there's always someone watching the building. It means I know where you are, not to control you, but to ensure I can reach you if necessary." He took my hand, lacing our fingers together. "I know it sounds invasive, but Jasmine, in my world, the people I care about become targets. I won't risk you or Maddie because I was too polite to insist on proper protection." "And your competitors? They know about us?" "They know I've claimed you," Adrian said bluntly. "Word travels fast. Most will respect that, the ones who don't." His jaw tightened. "I'll handle them before they become your problem." Maddie burst into the room then, his face flushed with excitement. "Mama! There's a room just for me, with a window that looks at the park. Can we live here? Please." I looked at my son's eager face, at Adrian's carefully neutral expression that couldn't quite hide the hope beneath it, at the beautiful apartment that represented safety and stability and everything I'd been fighting for. Pride suddenly seemed like a very expensive luxury. "Okay," I said. "We'll take it." Adrian's smile was like sunrise, transforming his usually stern features into something younger, lighter. Maddie cheered and threw himself at me, then at Adrian, who caught him with the practiced ease of someone who was rapidly getting used to small bodies launching themselves unexpectedly. "Can I decorate my own room?" Maddie asked Adrian, who'd somehow become the authority on all important decisions in the past few weeks. "Absolutely," Adrian said. "We'll go shopping tomorrow. You can pick out whatever you like." We moved in 2 weeks later. I'd expected Adrian to hire movers to pack up our old apartment, but instead he showed up in jeans and a t-shirt, the first time I'd seen him in casual clothes, and helped me pack every box personally. He handled Maddie's toys with care, wrapped dishes with surprising skill, and carried boxes down 4 flights of stairs without complaint. "You don't have to do this," I said, watching him carefully pack away the few photos I had of Maddie as a baby. "You could have sent people." "I want to do this," he replied. "I want to know everything about your life, including the parts you've built alone." "Besides," he added, holding up a chipped mug I'd kept despite its flaws, "I like seeing what you've held on to. What matters enough to move to the new place?" The new apartment transformed with our belongings. Adrian had arranged for furniture to be delivered, Good, solid pieces that would last. Nothing too expensive, but worlds better than the second-hand items I'd accumulated. Maddie's room was painted the blue he'd chosen, with clouds on the ceiling that glowed in the dark. My room had a proper bed, a real mattress that didn't sag, curtains that actually blocked light. It felt like a home within days. Adrian was there for all of it, and then he started staying later. First for dinner, then to help with Maddie's bedtime routine, then just to sit with me on the couch and talk about our days. He'd shed his suit jacket and loosen his tie, looking almost domestic if you ignored the gun I'd glimpsed once when he reached for something on a high shelf. "Does it bother you?" he asked one evening, noticing where my eyes had gone, knowing I'm armed. "I thought it would," I admitted, "but knowing you're capable of protecting us, that you could if something happened. It's strangely comforting." He pulled me against his side, and I went willingly, curling into his warmth. This had become our evening routine. Maddie asleep, the two of us tangled together on the couch, talking or watching television or sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. "Tell me about your father," I said, curious about the man who'd raised Adrian into this strange combination of dangerous and devoted. Adrian was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, he was Bratva through and through. Came to America with nothing, built an empire through blood and intimidation. I was 12 when he first took me to a meeting, where he had to handle a man who'd stolen from him. I tensed, but Adrian's hand kept stroking my hair, soothing. I watched my father shoot him. He continued quietly. Clean, quick, no hesitation. Then he turned to me and said, "This is our world, Adrianovich. We protect what's ours, and we destroy what threatens it. No mercy, no regrets." I threw up in the car on the way home. "Adrian?" "But I learned," he said. "Learned to be like him, to build on what he'd started. Learned to kill without hesitation, to inspire fear, to control through power. And I was good at it. Better than he'd been, because I added strategy where he'd used brute force. By the time he died, I'd already surpassed him." He tilted my face up to his. "But I never learned how to be human again. Never learned that there were parts of life that didn't require violence or control. Until you. Until I saw what it looked like to be strong through kindness, to build something real with just love and determination." His thumb brushed my lower lip. "You saved me, Jasmine, from becoming completely the monster my father made me." I kissed him, unable to find words sufficient for the emotions swelling in my chest. He responded immediately, deepening the kiss with a hunger we'd both been carefully restraining. His hands were in my hair, my body pressed against his, and when we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were dark with want. "I should go," he said, but made no move to leave. "Or you could stay," I heard myself say. "Maddie's asleep. We're both adults. You've been remarkably patient, and I'm tired of pretending I don't want more." Something flared in his expression, relief mixed with restraint. "Jasmine, I don't want you to feel pressured. I can wait until—" I cut him off with another kiss. "I'm not pressured. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Is that clear enough?" His answering smile was predatory and pleased. "Crystal clear, Mishka." He swept me into his arms with effortless strength, carrying me to my bedroom as if I weighed nothing. He set me down carefully, then proceeded to show me exactly how thorough Russians could be, learning my body with the same intense focus he applied to everything that mattered to him. Later, wrapped in sheets in Adrian's arms, I traced the scars that marked his torso, evidence of a violent life I'd never have to witness directly, because he was careful to keep that world separate from ours. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly, his fingers drawing patterns on my bare shoulder. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the simplicity of the truth. I didn't think I could be again. After James, after everything fell apart, I thought happiness was for other people. That my job was just to survive and make sure Maddie had what he needed. And now? Now I have more than I ever imagined, I admitted. A home, security, someone who sees me, who sees us. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I keep waiting for something to go wrong, because this much good doesn't happen to people like me. Adrian pulled me closer, his body warm and solid against mine. People like you? He repeated. You mean strong women who fight for their children? Who work themselves to exhaustion to provide? Who smile at strangers even when they're drowning? Those people deserve everything good, Jasmine, and I intend to spend however long you'll let me making sure you get it. A sound from the other room made us both freeze. Maddie, calling for me with that particular tone that meant he'd had a bad dream. I started to get up, but Adrian was faster, pulling on his pants and padding barefoot to Maddie's room. I followed, pulling on his discarded shirt, and found them in the moonlight streaming through Maddie's window. Adrian had scooped my son into his arms, murmuring something in Russian that I didn't understand but that seemed to calm Maddie immediately. Papa, Maddie mumbled, still half asleep. There was a monster. No monsters can reach you here, Adrian promised, settling into the small chair beside Maddie's bed with my son on his lap. I won't allow it. I leaned against the doorframe, watching this feared Mafia boss rock my 4-year-old back to sleep with a gentleness that made my eyes sting with tears. When Maddie's breathing evened out, Adrian carefully placed him back in bed, tucking the blankets around him with precise care. He found me in the doorway, and we returned to my room in silence. Back in bed, Adrian pulled me against him, and I felt his heart beating steadily beneath my palm. I love you, he said, the words quiet but heavy with meaning. I know it's fast. I know you might not be ready to say it back, but I need you to know. This isn't infatuation or obsession or possession. It's love, Jasmine. Real, permanent, choose you everyday love. My throat was tight with emotion, but I managed. I love you too. God help me, I do. And I'm terrified of it. Fear means it matters, Adrian said. Fear means you're not taking it for granted. That's good. That means we'll both fight to keep this. I fell asleep in his arms, feeling safer than I'd felt in my entire adult life. And when I woke to find him still there, making breakfast in my kitchen while Maddie chattered about his dreams, I realized this was what I'd been working toward all along. Not just survival, but life. Real, messy, complicated, beautiful life. With someone who'd chosen to fight alongside me instead of leaving me to fight alone. 3 months into our new life, I was starting to believe in happily ever after. Adrian had become a permanent fixture, keeping clothes at our apartment and spending more nights than not in my bed. Maddie had adjusted with the easy acceptance of children, calling Adrian Papa without hesitation, and saving his best artwork for when Adrian came home from work. Home. That's what it had become. Not just my place or our place, but home for all 3 of us. I was at work, my comfortable office job that paid well and didn't leave me exhausted, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Ms. Turner? A woman's voice, professional and cool. This is Detective Sarah Mitchell with the NYPD. I'm investigating certain business activities of Adrian Volkov, and I understand you've been in a relationship with him for several months. My blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Ms. Turner, please. We both know you're living in his building, that he's been supporting you financially, that he's developed a relationship with your son. I'm not calling to cause you problems. I'm calling because you're a potential witness, and witnesses in cases involving organized crime tend to be safer when they cooperate. I have nothing to say to you, I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. And you shouldn't be contacting me at work. Where else should I contact you? Your apartment that Volkov owns, while you're being driven around by his security? Ms. Turner, you're in deep with a dangerous man. For your son's sake, if not your own, please consider. I hung up, my hands shaking. Within seconds, I was dialing Adrian. He answered immediately. Jasmine, what's wrong? A detective just called me, Mitchell. She's investigating you, asking questions about our relationship, about Maddie. The words tumbled out in a rush. Adrian, what's happening? His voice went hard in that way that reminded me of the dangerous man beneath the devoted partner. Did she threaten you? No, just... She implied I might need protection, that witnesses are safer when they cooperate. Listen to me carefully, Adrian said, and I could hear him moving, could picture him dropping whatever business he'd been handling to deal with this. Detective Mitchell has been trying to build a case against me for 2 years. She's failed repeatedly, because there's nothing concrete to find in my legitimate operations. Now she's trying to use you as leverage. What do I do if she calls again? You tell her to contact my lawyer, Adrian said. Don't answer her questions. Don't engage. Don't let her make you afraid. I'm on my way to you now. We'll deal with this together. He arrived within 20 minutes, Mikhail and 2 other security personnel with him. My co-workers suddenly found reasons to be very interested in their computer screens, as Adrian strode through the office like he owned it, which, I realized with a start, he probably did. In the small conference room, he pulled me into his arms immediately. Are you all right? Scared, I admitted. Adrian, she knows about Maddie, about us. What if... Nothing is going to happen, he said firmly. Mitchell is frustrated because she can't touch me through legal channels, so she's trying to shake you up, hoping you'll say something she can use. But there's nothing to use, Jasmine. My business dealings are legitimate, complicated perhaps, and sometimes ruthless, but legal. And the other parts? I asked quietly. The parts that aren't in official records? His jaw tightened. Are completely separated from you. Mitchell has nothing because there is nothing connecting you to anything questionable. You're an employee in my real estate company, living in one of my buildings. That's all any investigation would show. But I could see the worry beneath his calm exterior. This bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Over the following weeks, the pressure intensified. Detective Mitchell seemed to materialize everywhere. At Maddie's daycare, asking questions about Adrian's involvement. At my work again, despite the lawyer's cease and desist letter. Even once at the grocery store, approaching me with that same professional smile. He's not who you think he is, Ms. Turner, she said, blocking my cart in the produce section. Men like Volkov, they don't change. They just get better at hiding what they are. And women like you, I replied, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Don't care who you hurt as long as you make your case. Adrian has been nothing but good to me and my son. If you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, arrest him. Otherwise, stop harassing his family. His family. The words were out before I'd consciously thought them, but they felt right. That's what we'd become. Mitchell's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. When this goes wrong, and it will, don't say you weren't warned. But the thing that worried me most wasn't the detective. It was the text I received from an unknown number a week later. Pretty boy, you've got there. Be a shame if something happened at that fancy daycare. I called Adrian immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Mikhail is picking up Maddie now, Adrian said after I'd read him the message, his voice deadly calm. Pack a bag. You're both staying at my place until we've identified the threat. Adrian, who would... Likely someone trying to get to me through you, he said. The Kozlov family has been pushing into territory they know is mine. This is their way of testing whether you're truly under my protection or just a passing interest. The casual way he discussed threats against my son made me want to scream. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Maddie being in danger because of your world. Maddie is in danger because I haven't made my position clear enough, Adrian interrupted, something cold and frightening in his voice. That ends today. His place turned out to be a penthouse in Manhattan, all sleek lines and expensive security. There were guards at every entrance, cameras covering every angle, and a panic room that Adrian showed me with clinical precision. This is insane, I said, looking at the reinforced walls and supplies. Adrian, this is how you live? Constantly prepared for attack? Yes, he said simply, but you don't have to. This is temporary, just until I've made certain. Clarifications. Maddie took it all as an adventure, delighted by the big windows and the view of the city. He didn't understand the danger, and I was grateful for his innocence, even as it made me more desperate to protect it. That night, after Maddie was asleep in one of the guest rooms, I found Adrian in his study, speaking rapid Russian into his phone. His expression when he saw me was carefully neutral, but I'd learned to read the tension in his shoulders. What are you going to do? I asked when he'd ended the call. Handle it, he said. The Kozlovs will receive a clear message that you and Maddie are not to be touched, threatened, or mentioned. They'll understand that doing so would be unwise. Handle it how? I pressed. Adrian, I need to know. Are you going to hurt people because of this? Kill someone. He was quiet for a long moment. If necessary. The honest answer should have horrified me. Instead, I felt something darker. A savage satisfaction that he would go to such lengths to protect us. What did it say about me that I could accept this violence as long as it kept Maddie safe? I'm not a good person, I said quietly. I should be telling you not to, should be appalled by all of this. But all I can think is that I'm glad you have the power to protect him. To protect us. What does that make me? Adrian crossed to me, tilting my face up to his. It makes you a mother. It makes you human. And it makes you mine. Because you understand what I am and accept it anyway. He kissed me with bruising intensity, and I responded with equal fervor, channeling all my fear and anger and desperate love into the connection between us. We ended up on the leather couch in his study, our coupling fierce and almost violent, an affirmation that we were both still here, still fighting, still together. The situation resolved itself within 3 days. I didn't ask for details, but the threatening texts stopped. Detective Mitchell suddenly backed off, citing lack of evidence, and the daycare director mentioned that some concerns about security had been addressed, resulting in significant upgrades to their systems. We returned to our apartment, but something had changed. Adrian was more cautious, more controlling about schedules and security. Mikhail was a permanent fixture now, driving Maddie and me everywhere. There were always guards nearby, men I'd learned to recognize even when they tried to blend into crowds. I feel like I'm suffocating, I admitted to Adrian one evening. I know it's necessary, I know it's for our safety, but Adrian, I can't live like this long term. Maddie can't grow up with armed guards following him to the park. He pulled me into his arms, and I felt the tension in his body. I know. I'm working on it. The Kozlovs have been dealt with. Their organization is falling apart. Once that's complete, once everyone understands that you're untouchable, I can ease back on security. How long? I asked. Soon, he promised. I swear to you, Jasmine, this isn't forever, just until the danger passes. But I was starting to understand that with Adrian, the danger never completely passed. It was always there, lurking, waiting for the next challenge, the next threat, the next person who thought they could test his power by going after what he loved. And he did love us. That much was clear in every action, every decision, every moment he spent with Maddie teaching him to tie his shoes or read simple words. He loved us completely, possessively, in that all-consuming way that was as terrifying as it was comforting. I was in too deep to back out now. We all were. For better or worse, our lives were entangled with Adrian Volkov's, and I had to believe that his power to protect us was greater than the danger that came with loving him. I had to believe it. Because the alternative, that I'd made a terrible mistake, that I'd put my son at risk for love, was too devastating to consider. It happened on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after what I'd started thinking of as the incident. I was at the park with Maddie, Mikhail stationed nearby with that careful vigilance I'd grown accustomed to. Maddie was on the swings, pumping his legs with determined focus, when a woman approached. She was older, well-dressed, with kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "What a beautiful boy," she said, watching Maddie. "How old is he?" "4," I said, automatically shifting closer to my son. After everything that had happened, strangers made me nervous. "Mine is 5, she said, gesturing to a girl playing in the sandbox, the phase where they think they can fly if they just try hard enough. I relaxed slightly. Just another mother, making conversation. Maddie's convinced he's going to reach the clouds one day. We chatted for a few minutes about the mundane challenges of parenting, and I was so distracted that I didn't notice when she stepped closer. Didn't realize something was wrong until I felt the pinch in my arm and looked down to see a syringe, now empty. "I'm sorry," the woman whispered. "They have my daughter. Said they'd kill her if I didn't." I tried to call for Mikhail, but my tongue felt thick, uncooperative. The world tilted sideways, and I was dimly aware of him running toward me, of Maddie screaming, "Mama!" of strong hands catching me before I hit the ground. Then nothing. I woke in darkness, my head pounding and my mouth dry as sand. The smell was wrong, stale cigarettes and mildew instead of the clean scent of our apartment. When I tried to move, I realized my hands were bound behind me, zip-tied to a chair. "She's awake." A light snapped on, blinding me. When my eyes adjusted, I saw 3 men in a room that was barely more than a warehouse space. Concrete floors, rusted metal walls, the distant sound of traffic suggesting we were somewhere industrial. "Ms. Turner," the man in front said, pulling up another chair to sit across from me. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the coldness in his eyes. I apologize for the dramatic extraction, but Mr. Volkov wasn't leaving us many options to have this conversation. "Where's my son?" I demanded, fear making my voice sharp. "If you hurt him—" "The boy is fine," he interrupted. "Still at the park with Volkov's man. We only needed you." Some of the terror receded, but not much. "What do you want?" "I'm Dmitry Kozlov," he said, as if the name should mean something. Then I remembered. The man from the restaurant. The one Adrian had threatened. "My family has been doing business in this city for 30 years. Then Volkov decides our territory belongs to him, and suddenly my nephews are dead. My operations are shut down, and I'm being pushed out of the market I built." "I don't know anything about Adrian's business," I said honestly. "I'm just the woman he loves," Dmitry interrupted. "The weak point in armor that didn't have weak points before you. Do you understand how valuable that makes you?" Ice flooded my veins. "He won't negotiate with you. He doesn't compromise." "Oh, I'm not asking for negotiation," Dmitry said, leaning forward. "I'm asking you to leave him. Publicly, dramatically. Tell him you can't live with what he is, that you're taking the boy and disappearing. Break his heart thoroughly enough, and he'll be too distracted to stop my people from reclaiming what's ours." I almost laughed. "And you think I'll do this why? Out of the goodness of my heart? Because the alternative is we kill you," Dmitry said simply. "Oh, not today. Not in a way that would make you a martyr. But accidents happen, Ms. Turner. Especially to single mothers with demanding children. Maybe you fall down some stairs. Maybe your brakes fail. Maybe there's a fire in your building that you don't wake up from." He pulled out his phone, showing me photos, Images of Maddie at the park, at daycare, in our apartment. Proof that they could reach him anytime they wanted. The boy lives, you live, but only if you walk away from Volkov. That's the deal. Before I could respond, before I could even process the threat, the door exploded inward with a sound like thunder. Men poured in. Adrian's people, armed and moving with military precision. The Kozlov men tried to fight, but it was over in seconds, ending with them face down on the concrete while Adrian strode through the chaos like an avenging angel. He looked terrifying in that moment, face set in lines of pure fury, eyes cold as winter. Every inch the dangerous man I'd always known lurked beneath the devoted partner. He went straight for Dmitri, hauling him up by his collar with one hand. "You touched what's mine," Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow more frightening than a shout. "You threatened my family." "Adrian," my voice came out as a croak. "I'm okay. Please." His eyes flicked to me, and something in his expression cracked. He dropped Dmitri, who slumped to the ground gasping, and crossed to me in 3 long strides. His hands were gentle as they cut through my restraints, careful not to hurt me even in his fury. "Did they hurt you?" he demanded, checking me over with frantic thoroughness. "Mishka, tell me where you're hurt." "I'm not," I said, falling into his arms the moment I was free. "Just scared. They threatened Maddie, showed me pictures." "I know." His arms tightened around me. "Mikhail told me everything. I've had people tracking them since they took you." He pressed his face into my hair, and I felt him trembling. "When I realized they had you, He didn't finish, but I understood. I'd seen what his world looked like without control. This was what happened when something truly threatened what Adrian Volkov loved." He turned back to Dmitri, his expression freezing back into that terrifying calm. "You have one chance to walk away from this city alive. Take it." "You don't own everything," Dmitri spat. "There are other families, other organizations. Someone will eventually—" "No one," Adrian interrupted, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Because after today, everyone will know exactly what happens to people who threaten my family. You're going to serve as that lesson, Dmitri. A very thorough, very visible lesson." I should have looked away from what happened next, but I didn't. I watched as Adrian methodically destroyed the man who'd threatened my son, using words and power rather than physical violence, but no less devastating. Within minutes, Dmitri Kozlov's remaining operations were being seized, his accounts frozen, his people choosing Adrian's side over their former boss. By the time we left that warehouse, Dmitri was broken in every way that mattered, and the entire city knew that Jasmine Turner and her son were under the absolute protection of Adrian Volkov. Untouchable. Sacred. Adrian kept me close on the drive back, his arms wrapped around me, his face buried in my hair. "I'm sorry," he said, over and over. "I should have protected you better. Should have seen this coming." "You found me," I said, holding him just as tightly. "That's what matters." Maddie was waiting at Adrian's penthouse, being watched by 6 security personnel who'd spoiled him with treats and games to distract from his fear. When he saw me, he launched himself into my arms with a sob. "Mama, the bad people took you." "But Papa brought her back," Adrian said, kneeling beside us. "And the bad people will never bother us again. I promise." That night, after Maddie had finally fallen asleep between us in Adrian's enormous bed, I lay in the darkness thinking about everything that had happened, about how close I'd come to losing everything, about the choice Dmitri had tried to force me to make. "I wouldn't have done it," I said quietly. "Even if you hadn't come. Even if they'd threatened worse. I wouldn't have left you." Adrian's hand found mine in the darkness. "I know. But the fact that they tried, that they thought they could use you against me, I can't allow that vulnerability to exist. What are you saying? He turned to face me, his expression serious even in the dim light. Marry me. Not someday, not when things settle down. Now. This week. Make it official, legal, permanent. I want every person in my world to understand that you're not just under my protection. You're my wife, my family, completely and irrevocably mine. My breath caught. Adrian. I love you, he interrupted. I love Maddie. I want to adopt him legally, give him my name, make sure that if anything ever happens to me, you're both protected by everything I've built. Please, Jasmine, say yes. I thought about all the reasons I should say no, about how fast this was happening, about the danger that came with loving him, about how different our worlds were. But then I looked at Maddie, sleeping peacefully because he trusted Adrian to keep him safe. I looked at Adrian, this dangerous, devoted man who'd literally torn apart an organization to get me back. Yes, I said, but I have conditions. His lips curved into a slight smile. Of course you do. We do this properly. I want Maddie to understand he's part of this, that we're choosing to be a family together. And I want him legally yours, with all the protections that provides. But Adrian, I also need you to promise me that you'll do everything possible to keep the violent parts of your world away from him. He can know you're powerful, that you protect people, but he doesn't need to see what that means in practice. Agreed, Adrian said immediately. Anything else? Just this. I cupped his face in my hands. I need you to promise you'll keep choosing us, keep choosing me, even when it's hard, even when your world demands things that conflict with this family we're building. Because I'm all in, Adrian. Completely, terrifyingly all in. But I need to know you are too. Jasmine Turner, he said seriously, I have been all in since the moment you asked if you could sit at my table in that cafe. Before that even. I've been waiting for you without knowing it, and now that I have you, I will never let go. That's not a threat. It's a promise. You and Maddie are my everything. He kissed me then, soft and deep and full of promise, while our son slept beside us, innocent and safe in the fortress of security Adrian had built around us. We married 5 days later at City Hall, with Mikhail and Mrs. Chen as witnesses and Maddie as the ring bearer, taking his job very seriously in his new suit. Adrian had offered a big wedding, but I'd refused. This wasn't about show or society. It was about the three of us, choosing each other, making it official. When the clerk pronounced us married and Adrian kissed me, Maddie cheered and called Adrian Papa without any hesitation, and I realized this was what I'd been working toward my entire life without knowing it. Not just survival, but joy. Real, messy, complicated joy with someone who saw all my broken pieces and loved me anyway. The adoption papers were filed that same day. Matthew Turner would become Matthew Volkov, officially and legally Adrian's son. The danger would always be there, lurking at the edges of our lives. But now we faced it as a family, united and protected by the love and power of a man who'd chosen us above everything else. As we left the courthouse, Adrian's arms around both Maddie and me, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in years, it felt full of possibility rather than just problems to solve. We went home, to the apartment that was truly ours now, to the life we were building together. And when Maddie asked if this meant we were really, really a family now forever, Adrian knelt down to his level and promised, "Forever, Maliesh. Nothing will ever change that." I watched them, my 2 boys, and knew that I'd found what I'd been searching for in that cafe during the storm. Not just shelter from the rain, but someone who would weather every storm with me. Someone who'd been waiting, just as I had, for the moment when our paths would cross and everything would finally click into place. Adrian had said he'd waited long enough. What I hadn't understood then was that we'd both been waiting. For each other. For this. For the family we were meant to become. And now, finally, the waiting was over.